All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mary Smith, and I'm an ADHD life coach. I specialize in working with 16-year-olds and under in a collaborative environment with their parents. I have also created a parent training program called Chaos Free Family, and that is to help parents better understand ADHD and the types of strategy that can improve performance for those impacted by ADHD, those strategies that seem to work a little bit better. I want to introduce Stacey Cannon. Stacey is a certified ADHD life coach with 20 years of experience as a speech pathologist in the private sector and the public school system. She received her coach training from ADD Coach Academy, and most recently is a graduate of the Chaos Free Family training as a coach. Her specialized training provides her with a unique capacity to help children and parents impacted by ADHD be diagnosed with ADHD herself, and raising a child with ADHD help her connect with her clients in a unique way that very few coaches can. So please welcome to the Chaos Free Family trained coach and person with whom I am proud to serve the ADHD community, Stacey Cannon. Stacey, it's all yours.
All right. Thanks, Mary. A big hello to everybody tonight, and thank you for joining. We had a great turnout for this, so I'm really excited to share my information. And we had a little hiccup with some technology, so I can't see anybody at the moment, but we're just going to keep proceeding, okay? And before we get started, I just wanted to give a special thank you to Mary Smith, who was just introducing me, for hosting tonight and helping me in the planning stages for tonight. The plan is to go through the slides and then we will take questions. So I just want to respect everybody's time. So we will get started with the presentation. So next slide, please.
You bet. And if I could ask everyone, since we have so many people on the call, we're expecting up to 75. If you have a question, please type it in the chat, and we'll get those at the end of the session, of the presentation, okay?
All right. Are we on the next slide?
Yes.
Okay.
There we go.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sorry.
That's all right. We're just going with the flow here. Okay, special education basics. It's guided by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and IDEA is a law that is allowing for a free, appropriate public education to eligible children with disabilities. And it's based on the results of a FIE, which is a full individual evaluation. And that is an evaluation. That's your report. And that includes your areas of communication, physical health, sociological, intellectual, academics, and assistive technology. So to some extent, those are all going to be covered depending on the needs of the child. Some are going to be, areas are going to be more involved and looked at more in depth than others. And you're also going to be meeting specific criteria corresponding to the eligibility areas. And we're going to get to the specific eligibility area for ADHD in a bit. And with special education, it also comes, you'll have that IEP. And you're going to have accommodations and or some modifications with that, and they're all based on the individual needs of the child. The benefits of special education, you're going to have more comprehensive services, and you'll have many more rights and safeguards. The ARD committee, and I did say ARD, and I'm going to get to that in just a second, which is your IEP committee. You meet yearly, and your evaluations are conducted every 3 years by law. And you have to adhere to certain timelines. And before we get to the next ARD, or the next slide, I'm sorry, I wanted to talk about ARDs. I know some people might be from out of state, and in Texas, we call IEPs ARDs, and that stands for Admission Review Dismissal. So just know, as I've already, mentioned the term ARD, it's the same thing as an IEP, and it's just a habit for me. So you'll probably hear me say that term again, and they're just interchangeable. All right, next slide. Okay, the basics of a 504, it's guided by the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it's also, the Office of Civil Rights is also a part of this. And under the Americans with Disabilities Act, it's the Section 504 that protects the right of individuals with disabilities and programs that receive funding from the U.S. Department of Education. You need a diagnosis for 504, and the diagnosis needs to come from a doctor or another medical professional. And typically, that is what is provided to the school to kind of get that ball rolling. And a 504 provides accommodations that put somebody on a level playing field with gen ed peers. It can be short-term or long-term. Long-term meaning ADHD. ADHD is something that doesn't go away. A short-term 504 would be, say you're right-handed and you break your wrist. You may need some accommodations because that is a physical impairment, although temporary. But those accommodations can be put in place while you're in the healing process. And obviously, once you're healed, you're probably not going to need those anymore. The benefits to having a 504 are, it's great when families may not want their child to receive special education, or if their child didn't qualify for special education after testing is done. It's great if students only need accommodations, and it's available at the college level, and there's just less paperwork. If you're one of those that might get overwhelmed, that could be important to you. All right, next. The similarities between the two, okay, they both provide for what we call FAPE, a free appropriate public education. And that is an individual's right for somebody with a disability to have a free appropriate public education. For both of these, you get individualized accommodations, and they both protect against discrimination, and parents are involved in the process. Now, you're either going to be under a 504 plan or special education. Okay, it wouldn't be both. All right, next, requesting a 504. Always let the teachers know. It's just helpful. Sometimes they may not be aware there could be a concern until you bring something up. And just let the school know that you're interested in 504 services for your child due to ADHD, and ask them what they need from you to document the diagnosis. This can vary from district to district on what they will accept. And the person who would be able or should be able to answer that best is your 504 coordinator. And just another thing, timelines aren't part of the 504 process as they are for special education. And the meetings should just be scheduled in a timely manner. In those districts that do have a strong 504 process are going to review these yearly and really involve the parents in this whole process. Next. Okay, requesting a special education evaluation. Always speak to your teacher first. It just helps everybody to be on the same page and let them know about the ADHD and how you feel it impacts their education, and let them know what you're seeing at home, because there are things that are related to school that you're seeing in home, meaning it might take 2 hours to complete homework when on a typical child, it might take 30 minutes. Okay, so those are the things that are helpful for the teacher. Let an administrator know that you're interested in having your child evaluated for special education because of the ADHD, and that you spoke with the teacher. Most schools have a set procedure in place for referrals, and it just helps keep things organized. I will tell you that if you put the request in writing, and really this is more for an administrator rather than giving this to the teacher, the school has, or the district has 15 school days to get back to you and to start that process, or let you know that they decided that an evaluation is being denied. Now, once you fill out all the paperwork, and it's going to be a lot. The teachers have to fill stuff out. Obviously, the parents do. And so a lot of times that's given before a consent. And the school does have 45 days, school days, to do the evaluation and to write that report. And here's the thing that, in my experience, that a lot of parents aren't aware of, is that the evaluation timeline starts when the school receives the consent back signed. For example, let's say you sign consent to evaluate on September 10th, and it sits on the kitchen table for a week. It gets to back to the school on September 20th. The timeline is going to start September 20th, as opposed to that original date you dated it. In my example, it was the 10th. So I just wanted to make that clear. And it can get a little long when you start getting close to the holidays, because all that time is not going to be included for days, for that 45 days. All right, next. Okay, eligibility. All right, so the first thing, and this is at the point where the report's written. So when you're at your meeting, the evaluator or evaluators, because you could have more than one, will be going over the FIE, which was that full individual evaluation covering all those areas. And again, that includes testing classroom observations, parent information, teacher information, and if you have any information from the doctor. Not all evaluations are going to require it, but for ADHD, that's crucial. ADHD falls under the eligibility of other health impairment, and the doctor must complete that documentation for what we call OHI, that other health impairment eligibility. And that's typically a form that the school provides. You can take it to the doctor, or with your permission, you would just sign a consent form. The school can send that to the doctor. And this is where I'm going to talk about the importance of having that diagnosis. It's a good idea to either have that diagnosis or have your doctor's appointment set up within a couple of weeks of you signing that original consent, because what you don't want to happen is, okay, you've signed for consent for testing, maybe your child hasn't officially been diagnosed. You go to call the doctor and it might be 5 months out before you can get an appointment. The special education timeline for testing doesn't stop for that sort of thing. So that could impact making that eligibility determination of OHI, because you may not have the paperwork ready. So just my recommendation to either move forth with signing that consent for testing if you've already been diagnosed, or if you have an appointment close to setting up, just so you don't run into something like that. But you certainly don't have to follow that, but it's just what's recommended. After that report's written, from that date of the report, you have to have an IEP meeting, and this is the ARD meeting, and that's scheduled within 30 calendar days of the date of the report. And this is where the IEP committee comes together to review the report, and the committee determines eligibility, and that's you. That includes you, the parent. And also at this meeting is where, if they do qualify, you're going to have recommendations for those accommodations, and you'll see what goals are proposed, and your plan will be presented. And also at this initial meeting, and you'll do this just one time, a parent does have to give their permission for their child to be placed into special education. And so just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is where I'm going to talk about accommodations and modifications. Accommodations are available for both a 504 and an IEP. Modifications are just going to be on an IEP. For this webinar, we're going to talk about accommodations because that is what is most common for ADHD. All right, so typically you're going to see a modification with students who have multiple eligibilities that are going to have a hard time with the general education curriculum. And a definition for accommodation, it's the how. You're changing how a student learns and how they adapt to the learning environment, and that's where the accommodations come in. A modification, which we're not going to talk about, but I put it in here just so you know what the difference is. It's the changes to what a student is taught, and that can include things like changing up the curriculum. All right, next, we are going to jump into those examples of accommodations. These are just some I put down that are common among ADHD. And my advice is to pick accommodations that are appropriate for the child and those, that they really need. Okay. So I'm just going to go through these and I'm going to touch base on just a couple of them. You can have extra time, reminders to stay on task and to slow down, preferential seating, small group, and having fewer math problems on a page, chunking assignments and projects. A student can seek a designated quiet area to avoid distractions to complete work. Teachers providing a copy of class notes following a student's attempt at notes. Use of a phone for organizing and planning. Noise canceling headphones. Allowing for breaks or time to move around. Positive reinforcement, teacher check-ins on the planner, and teacher can repeat instructions and check for understanding. And there can certainly be more. I wanted to touch base on small groups. If this is one you're possibly looking at or is being recommended, ask your school what a small group looks like. Sometimes they're not so small, or you can have students that tend to be noisier in these small groups, or those other students, their accommodations could be distracting for your child. So just keep that in mind. And I wanted to share just what I meant by fewer math problems on a page. You would have the same math test as other kids in Gen Ed. It would just be broken up a little different. You might have 5 problems on a page instead of 10. You would just have more pages on your test. And that's kind of an example of chunking when it comes to math. And with the chunking with reading assignments, you can paperclip some pages together, and then it just kind of helps break things up. So it's just easier to get through. And then for the phones, okay, a lot of schools and school districts are starting to have no cell phone rules out there. So I've added this. And like it says, it'd be for organizing and planning. But I would recommend that everybody is on the same page, including your child, so that they know if they can bring it out, it's for certain specific purposes, and it's not a free-for-all. Because, for those schools that have those rules in place, it's, yes, you want to respect that and only have that available for certain things that a student needs. Next. Okay, preparing for your meeting. Write down any questions you have, bring them with you. Make plans to attend in person, by phone, or virtually. And just know when schools are trying to schedule that a lot of times it's dependent on that teacher's conference period. And so that's why they may schedule it at certain times. But again, every school and or district has different ways they like to schedule these meetings, whether it be 504 or an IEP meeting. Things you can do is ask for those proposed accommodations ahead of time, so they're not new to you when you're first going to the meeting. And that's the same for an IEP and a 504. And you can also ask for those goals if you're having an IEP meeting. And that's just good to have an idea of what they are being proposed before you go into that meeting. And it can help if you have questions too, because you have time to think about some stuff ahead of time instead of kind of being put on the spot during the meeting. You can certainly, you're a part of these committees, make recommendations yourself. And you can do that ahead of time. A lot of times that can help the person preparing things, one, either to know about it, and if it's something that is reasonable, either they've probably already put it in there or they don't mind putting it in there. And it's just going to save some time when it comes time for that meeting. All right, next. Okay, so what if a school says no to certain accommodations? Okay, listen to what they have to say first. They may have an alternative. If it's something that's reasonable that's being denied, explain why you feel it's warranted and just request that it be documented in the deliberations. And you can do that on an IEP and a 504. For an IEP, you can, at the end, there's a part where the parent can agree or disagree to everything. It's your right to check disagree. And there's a procedure if you do, and you would just reconvene in 10 days. But I'm not going to get into all of that tonight. But just know that those things are available and you have those rights. Hopefully, during your meeting, it can be resolved. And many times it can. And if you're in a 504, because you don't have as many safeguards and rights, so to speak, as, I said earlier, as one would with special education, again, just have them document and state why. This is what I've done when I've been in a 504 as a parent. I just didn't sign it at the end. And there is a procedure in place as well for this, but a lot of times what my district did, on the couple of occasions, we just reconvened in a few days and everything was resolved. But just know that there's procedures in place to help you. And those handouts you're given you're going to get one for a 504. You're going to get information for IEPs. Read through those because those have all the information about your rights. Some are lengthy, but keep those handy if you do need to refer back to those. If there's something that comes up where you and the school aren't in agreement. Okay, next. So if an accommodation isn't working, which it happens and that's okay, talk to your teacher and the child first, just so you kind of have both sides and have a better idea about what's going on. And after you talk to the teacher, you can request a 504 or an IEP to remove or tweak the accommodations. That is your right. And it would probably be appropriate if something's not working. And just keep in mind that different teachers have different teaching styles. And so things might need to be changed from one year to the next. And also, some things may need to be changed based on maturity. Things are always kind of fluid, but just know that you have the right to request meetings for the 504 or IEP at any time once you've already, you have a plan in place. Okay, next. Okay, if the accommodations are not being followed, talk with the teacher, and just know that teachers are given the information, whether it be the 504 or IEP, such as your accommodations or accommodations and goals, on or before the first day of school, so you can have your child receiving those services and accommodations right off the bat. And they'll be updated as meetings occur and things get changed. So they should always have the most updated copy of all those. And these have to be followed. That's not to say that there are teachers out there that just don't follow it. But most often teachers do. So, but document when something isn't followed. Like I said, reach out to the teacher. And I put an example in there that you can read. If after you've talked to the teacher and there's still no resolution, reach out to administration and let them know. And you can, again, always call for a 504 or an IEP meeting if, you've kind of gone through these paths by talking to the teacher and administration and it's still not being followed. Call a meeting, whether it be 504 or IEP, and address those concerns formally. And I always recommend, like I said earlier, having those accommodations that are needed and appropriate. It's a lot easier for teachers to keep track of and implement than having some in there that might not be used very often or a child doesn't need. So, remember those things, and you should be good to go for this whole process if there's hiccups with accommodations. All right, next. Okay, this is a slide on private school, and I have included information with a link that talks about private school in special education. And I'm just going to go and give y'all a broad explanation because there's lots of things and factors that impact services. But one important thing is, in Texas, homeschool is considered private school for special education purposes. Federal law requires school districts to look for and evaluate any student who is suspected of having disabilities. That's what we call child find. And the evaluation decisions are made by the school district where the private school is located. Okay, so a lot of things are going to be impacted. And I want to say with private schools, there are things like for-profit, nonprofit private schools. And if your child is evaluated by the public school and found eligible for special education, a service plan is created. It's like an IEP, but you're not going to have all the safeguards. You're not going to have the FAPE, the free appropriate public education. And it could be just something that says, okay, this child is eligible for special education. And if the parent chooses to enroll their child in public school, we can offer XYZ. But in the meantime, as a school district, we can offer these services for the child, or the school district may not have funding and they might not be able to provide this certain type of service. The last thing I want to say about this, for parents in private school, who have enrolled their children in private school, when you do that, you do waive your right to a free appropriate public education. So that's why I said it gets kind of dicey, and I'm just going to kind of leave it at that for tonight's presentation. All right. Before we get to questions, I wanted to let y'all know that I am available for educational consulting, and I'm happy to attend a 504 meeting or an IEP meeting, and I can do that nationally, and I can do that virtually. If somebody's local and they want me to attend a 504 or an IEP, I'm willing to travel within 30 miles of my office that's located in Kerrville. And so just email me if you're interested in having me attend a meeting. Otherwise, if you're interested in educational consulting, click the QR code that is in the presentation to set up an appointment for us to talk about your child's education. And that's all I've got for the presentation. Let's open this up to questions.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the share, but if you need that QR code, it is in the handout. Okay, so you'll be able to look at that in the handout. It works there. Great. So I'm trying to make my thing. You guys can use the chat, or you can raise your hand in the in your window, and we can call on you. In the meantime, while we're waiting for everyone to kind of line up, I did have one question from before the session started, Stacey.
Okay.
This person has a child who has ADHD, ODD, dyslexia. What accommodations should they provide to assist him? And is there more than one type of learning program that could help him?
Okay, that is kind of getting into some areas that are out of my expertise, like as far as specific accommodations for dyslexia and ODD. But with somebody with those diagnoses, or I should say eligibilities, it's not just going to be in OHI. If it's dyslexia, you're going to have the learning disability eligibility, or you should. I know the state of Texas has a lot of new guidelines in place for that. But as far as, accommodations, specific for ODD, that's kind of out of my area of expertise, and that's really more individualized for the child.
Yeah, if I can jump in for dyslexia, for sure, for sure they should be getting dyslexia therapy services, for sure, and that's done through the school. What else they can do is they can have speech to text or text to speech, so that if they're given an assignment on an iPad, the iPad can read it to them instead of them having to read it off of there. Or if they're having to write an assignment, they can use speech to text, where they can say what they want it to write, and then it will type it for them and then edit. Then you can edit, that the child can edit them. For ODD, a lot of times it has to do with the behavioral modifications that they're using. Like they're not allowed to, that they need to give the child a calm down room. They need to give them free access to the counselor or something like that. Right. And that's, if I have a child like that, we usually talk to the counselor about what do you guys have in the school that can help de-escalate that. And can you talk to the teachers and share some techniques with de-escalation with them to use? So sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's okay. And with that ODD, a lot of times, like you said, they're going to have that behavior plan in place that is developed by that behavior specialist, whoever it may be on campus.
And a lot of people don't understand that a behavior plan can be part of 504 and IEP too. Is a lot of times people think that it's only an academic thing that would get you into a 504 or an IEP, but a social skills thing or behavior disorder can also get you in there as well. We have one more question.
Okay.
My 8-year-old makes a lot of careless mistakes doing the work correctly, but answering the wrong question, and proofreading errors, like not remembering to check for capitalization and punctuation. Is there accommodation to address that specifically, aside from getting more time?
Yes, and that is where your reminders to slow down are going to come into play. You could also, and this is specific to the child, maybe they can have a visual on their desk as a reminder to kind of slow down, or something specific to remind them to, check for that punctuation. And for the careless things, they do their work, but you said they might not answer the right question. That can be where the teacher comes into play in checking on that, to ensure that child is understanding the directions on a particular assignment.
Right. The accommodation might be, don't accept the work if they answer the wrong question. If they didn't do the back, don't grade the paper with the back missing. Right. Just hand it back. Say you answered the wrong question or you didn't do the back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyone else have a question? You can type it in the chat or raise your hand to the screen, raise your hand on the chat window, on the participant window. Okay. We're not seeing very many questions. So here's something that I run across, Stacey, is when I'm talking with parents and doing an information session with them, I will ask, it's a typical question, does your child have an IEP or a 504? And the answer is kind of always, yes, we have that. Yeah, well, what are some of the accommodations?
Yeah.
I don't know, more time. And they don't know what the accommodations are that they're supposed to get.
Okay. My first recommendation, save a copy of the paperwork. It's always helpful to go back, because to piggyback on that, I have had a lot of parents, oh, I don't know where my paperwork is, or I told them I didn't need a copy. And it's great for you just to go back and review. And once, I do ask for those as well, and I ask for copies. And so I always kind of point out, this is what they're getting for accommodations. And you told me, it's a new school year, they're struggling with this. Well, let's take a look at their accommodation and, check with that teacher to see if that's being implemented. And yes, it should be, but reality is reality. Things happen and so forth. But sometimes I do have to and it's good. I mean, at least for me, to explain what these things are and the importance of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, asking for any more questions. If you do, you can wave at the screen or you can put your hand up in the participant window or anything. I think I'm looking all in there. Another thing I might ask Stacey is, those evaluations that we get back, that paperwork is written in Greek. Which one of the people can we ask to please explain what this means in layman's terms?
I would, find out who were the ones doing the evaluation. And what I mean by that, pulling the child to do the testing. And yes, this is for the IEPs for your special education. Because those are the ones that are going to be able to answer that. I've always given a summary when I've done my speech evaluation in layman's terms. I find that is going to be the best way for a parent to understand. A lot of them don't end up reading it for that very reason. Like you said, it's hard to follow. And I will say, the evaluators have to put certain information in to meet the requirements of that evaluation.
Yeah.
There are other people who have to sign it that might not, I don't want to say they weren't part of the evaluation, because they were, but not in the same sense as maybe a school psychologist, an occupational therapist, or a speech pathologist, where they may have provided, it could be the classroom teacher who provided the teacher information. But I would just ask them to kind of summarize that evaluation so that you understand. I've always asked, do you understand what we have shared regarding the results? And so I think that helps. But don't be afraid to ask if you don't understand the evaluation. Hey, can you just summarize this?
Yeah.
You're going to have people who summarize, and you're going to have people who go through it piece by piece to where a parent's going to get lost.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
all right. New question. My child has both IEP and 504. I would like a better understanding that my child can have either IEP or 504. When I ask this of my team, probably the school team, they say you have qualified to come to the playground and now you can play on different slides or swings. I asked this because my team I asked this of my team because he has autism and ADHD. I asked how to break down what is needed to be sure what his needs in both areas are met. This question is dismissed. And he's also going to be tested for dyslexia.
Okay. Typically, like I said, one or the other. Now, it's easier. Okay, say your child was 504 first. Let's just say for ADHD, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then they were evaluated due to concerns with autism. Most schools are going to just dissolve the 504 and bring it over to the IEP. I would say it's unethical to receive funding. Let's say, oh, there's a 504 for ADHD, and we have ADHD supports on the IEP. That's my opinion. Now, the only time I would think, and I'm not a lawyer, I am not a special ed coordinator, a 504 coordinator, but my example for when maybe you would have both would be, okay, my child is receiving an IEP for the eligibilities of autism and the other health impairment due to the ADHD. And let's bring in that example where they break their hand and have a physical impairment.
Yeah.
And let's say it's the very end of the year. They may have a 504 drawn up to address that broken hand because it's temporary.
But the autism really swings it to IEP.
Absolutely.
And dyslexia, if it's positive for dyslexia, will be IEP now
It
too.
will be. And there are big time new regulations for the state of Texas and all regarding that. I'm not as well versed in that part, but it just makes sense with what you shared for everything to fall under an IEP, and that would be best practice.
I think I just misunderstood. I think that just brings clarity. I think
Okay.
he qualified for the 504 with autism and the ADHD, but yeah, I hear, but it sounds like the IEP is more all encompassing.
Yes, and you're gonna want the IEP, like Mary said, especially with that autism going on, because let's just say even down the road, there might be some things, maybe, and I'm just being hypothetical here, with behavior, you're going to have more safeguards in place. Okay. As far as just protections, and it's easier just for all this to be implemented for your child to get him or her what they need for services.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Stephanie, you had your hand up. Stephanie Holman.
Yeah, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure before I continued. So I have a 4.5-year-old. He is in a private pre-K. I had planned on, per the pediatrician, to begin the process of a 504 as he begins to go into kinder next year at his home campus. His pre-K teachers have recommended already that I go ahead and start that process now, but they have recommended an IEP. But listening to this presentation, he has, at this point in time, has no other diagnosis other than ADHD, and he's only pre-K. It sounds to me like I'm really probably looking more for a 504 at this point. And I've already contacted my home school. I should be speaking with them on the phone first thing in the morning. So I assumed that they'll take me through that process. But am I thinking right that it's probably going to be more of a 504 at least to begin with? And is it too soon to start this?
Really, you could go either route for seeking help, the 504 or an IEP. You can always talk to the administration and just let them know, what the concerns are at this point at the classroom level. And it wouldn't hurt to take their recommendations into consideration.
There's not a danger if she asks for IEP and they say no IEP to not get anything. They will put her in the right place if she asks for the wrong thing.
They will. And
yeah,
at least your foot is in the door one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And once your child enters kindergarten, they're going to have a watchful eye on him. And recommendations should be made if there's more of a concern. If they happen to recommend 504, as the year goes on. And I always say in kindergarten, those teachers kind of do a lot of stuff for those kids just because it's kindergarten. So a lot of those things are going to be in place. And as a child gets older, once those things start to go away and a child is more independent, sometimes you might need some more support. But just go with what they're going to recommend. And like Mary said, it's not going to hurt.
They won't kick you out if you ask for the wrong thing.
Okay, yeah, that's what it
Yeah.
doesn't hurt to go to get either of them. Just start the process and see where it takes us.
Yes. But with 504, since he's not at that school, they may, I don't know, they could wait and have this scheduled more towards the end of the school year. So your child's ready to go at the beginning of the year. There's just different things involved.
Okay. I'm sorry, then it sounds, maybe then are they possibly suggesting the IEP because it is private at this point? Well, does that make a difference or no?
Well,
it doesn't matter to me.
No.
Okay.
And yeah.
They may be saying IEP, Stephanie, because that's the term they know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good
So,
point.
Sounds good.
Yeah, Stacey, one more question.
Yes.
When should request for accommodations to take the SAT test begin? During registration or for the test, or well before? Can you kindly clarify this process?
Okay, this is a great question because I am in this exact same process with my child. So you go through the College Board for this process, and it's my understanding, and I asked my the high school counselor this as a parent, do it in advance because it can take several weeks for accommodations to be approved for the SAT. And so the website for SAT and College Board, really College Board, is going to answer, I haven't looked at it yet, is going to answer a lot of those questions for you regarding accommodations with that, because those are going to be separate from the school classroom accommodations. Okay. And they do allow for parents to do those as opposed to it coming just from the school. But do it sooner than later, just because it takes time. And look at the College Board website, because it's my understanding they have trainings on this process that I have not looked at.
So a training for the parent to know
how
to do
parents.
this. Okay. So you're saying that you should probably start this process before registering for a certain date.
I would think so. And especially if you want a date that's coming up.
Yeah. Okay. Great. One more question, please clarify. I believe 504s follow kids when they change schools or age up, but do IEPs also follow kids?
Yes. Okay. If you move to another district and you already have either the 504 or IEP in place, it follows the child. I recommend to provide the incoming school with that paperwork. It just makes things go faster.
Yeah.
There is a procedure in place once your child enters the new school, whether it's 504 or special education.
Right. And the reason this follows the child wherever they go in a public school is because this is a federal program. This is a federal law that you're talking about. Any more questions? I'm at the end of my list here. All right, just checking. Was everyone's who I asked your question from the chat line, did we answer it completely? You can unmute yourself if we did not answer that completely. Otherwise, what I will do is I will tell Stacey, thank you very much for providing this information. And thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it. And if you have any questions about preparing for ARD IEP meetings, call Stacey, use that QR code. That's what she's there for. She's the expert here. It's okay if you are a current client of mine, and you need to ask Stacey for some advice. It's okay. I will not be jealous. I will not be upset. Okay. That is why I asked her here, so that she could provide service for my existing clients as well as those who are not. Okay. So, all right. Thank you very much, everyone. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Stacey, fabulous job. Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.